every once in a while there are things that happen that help us to get a glimpse and to remember the past. And sometimes it's in the oddest of situations, but this week I had to go see my dermatologist. Nate, and I've been seeing Nate for about 3.5 years now. And so he found a couple places that he thought he should probably freeze so that they didn't spread anymore. And he took a biopsy from a little spot in my back, which is not unusual. But we talked about my dad, because Nate was the one that took care of my dad when Dad had skin cancer. And Nate goes to me, he says, I still hear your dad's voice once in a while, that deep little growl that he had when he'd talk. And I said, oh yeah, I hear it once in a while too. It's usually when I'm doing something that I know my dad would not agree with. And I can hear that voice, it's there to kind of keep us in line, to help us to know what we're supposed to do. And I think that's what's happening a little bit here in Timothy. Paul's voice is coming through the letter. And I am sure that Timothy is not just reading the letter, he is hearing the letter. And Paul is just wanting him to understand how important these basic things that he is talking about are to his spiritual well-being and to the church's spiritual well-being. You see, Paul with all of his what appears to be strength in the letters that he writes, realizes that without a doubt that he is a wimp without God. And he realizes how much he needed God and how much he needs him in his life. And he wants Timothy, he wants you and me, he wants us to understand how much we need God. I was just thinking, I was talking to some people this morning, but I was thinking this last week. I drove 328 miles to get here because I went through Heppner this week. And I ended up having to replace one tire on my trailer because of a semi driver that was where he shouldn't have been. But that is the worst thing that has happened in all of the miles that Rhonda and I have driven back and forth. And I think, wow, God is really good. I have not had a flat tire that has stranded me anywhere. I haven't had a car break down. I do go by people whose cars break down, and I say, Lord, help them, and please don't let that happen to me. Because I don't want to be stranded out there. But I realize how much he takes care of us and how much he cares about us. The fact that all of the fire around Lone Rock got within 150 feet of my house, but it didn't get to my house. It didn't get to any of the people's houses in Lone Rock. And Alita, my next door neighbor, is very accurate. She says, oh, it's just a miracle. There's no other way to describe what has happened here is a miracle. You see, Paul is wanting Timothy, and he's wanted us to realize that God is there for us and he's involved in our lives, and he cares about us, and he wants us to care about the right things. Rhonda and I have a very good friend, couple that we know. This lady is absolutely gorgeous. And her husband, they would put him on, what is that, GQ magazine, is that the name of it? To whatever, for men, the guys that, they're the couple that you would take the picture to put on top of the wedding cake. And it would be wonderful if that's where wouldn't be wonderful. It'd be horrible if that's where their beauty stopped. But it's not where it stops. They are truly the people that are pretty from the inside out. They're the ones that are taking care of her grandmother, who, when they bought their house in Texas, decided that they needed a house that had 2 master bedrooms in it so that grandma could have her own area in the house. They're also the couple that are doing what Sarah and Alan do, and sending their daughter off to college, and she's pregnant. And I think that's kind of comical. She's going to have another baby. There's the you're not doing that? Oh, gee. Yeah, but she's pregnant. But what is cool about this is they've wanted a 3rd child for 18 years, almost. And now they're going to have that as the oldest one is going off to college, which I thought was kind of a little of Abraham and Sarah going on there. So, but Paul says to Timothy, he says to us, he says, I want you to make sure you're creating the right type of wealth. And he's not saying to anybody that you can't be rich. That is not what he's saying. I mean, there have been people who have said, oh, rich people just can't go to heaven. Well, yes, they can. They can also go to hell. But you know what? Poor people can go to heaven, and poor people can go to hell too. Okay? So let's just understand, it has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with how they react to it and how they treat it. And I have not seen the overheads. Rhonda emailed these, and so he says we need to create heavenly wealth. Well, what does that mean? And he says, well, I think he tells us this. He says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. Notice he doesn't say, don't tell them they can't have any money. He doesn't tell them that being rich is wrong. What he tells them is that if you're haughty about that, if you're not generous with it, if you're like the man who had a great crop, so he decides, oh, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger ones so I can store it all. I'm not going to share it with anybody. He says that's the way you're not supposed to act. What I have found amazing in this fire situation and people looking and scrounging and trying to find feed for their cattle are people donating both money and hay. Out of their own barns, they're donating hay so that those who need it will have it. They're doing good works. See, sometimes I think that we can get mixed up in our Christianity, where that doing the things of church, we get the idea that if I do those things, then I'm going to be okay. Does that mean then that this morning on your way to church, excuse me, and you go by your neighbor's house that's on fire, you say, oh, I got to get to church, I can't stop and help? Is that what that means? If that means, oh, I'm on my way to church and I go by somebody who's got a flat tire and it's an older lady by herself, or it's a young girl by herself who maybe doesn't even know where the tire jack is, that I don't stop because, oh, I got to be on time for church. Does that mean that I'm on my way to church and I'm the preacher and my neighbor and his wife are going through a struggle and she's asking him to leave the house and that she doesn't want him to come back? Does that mean that I go to church and say, I'll be back at 12:30 to talk to you about it? No. We do that which is most important. We keep the main thing the main thing. And for Jesus, the main thing was helping to take care of other people so that not only their physical needs are met, but their spiritual needs are met. I really liked what Bruce had to say to us about prayer, where he says, do we pray about people's spiritual well-being? Are we concerned about that? Is it something that is the top of our list of what we do? We have a couple that live in Lone Rock that both of them are not Christians, and he's got cancer issues and she's not healthy either, and got heart issues. Am I more concerned about their physical well-being or their spiritual well-being? And what is the good things that I can do to help them? How do I help point them toward Christianity in a way that they would understand it, coming from a family at both sides that neither one of them have ever went to church? How do I do that? What are the good things that I do? You know, as I said at the beginning, volunteerism is basically dead in America. Unfortunately. It just doesn't happen the way it should happen. I just saw where there's a district of Little League that they're trying to find people who will serve on their board. And then that's the easy part. And now I got to find people who will coach, and I got to find people who will umpire, and I got to find people who will sponsor, and I got to yada, 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 yada. If they struggle with that in Little League, why would we think that we wouldn't struggle with doing some of the good things in church sometimes that we need to do? I'm just saying that we have to be careful that we don't get those things mixed up, that we are careful about it. See, we need to do the right thing. In Matthew 25th chapter, verses 35 and following, Jesus says, well, when I was sick, you did not care for me. When I was naked, you didn't bring me clothes. When I was in prison, you didn't visit me. And his disciples said, well, when did we ever see you, sick? When did we ever see you hungry? When did we ever see you naked? When did we see you in prison? He says, if you haven't done it to the least of these, then you haven't done it to me. We need to take care of the people around us. One of my biggest complaints, and this is Ray, okay? You don't have to agree with me at all. This is not a heaven or hell issue. It's not a salvation issue. But why is it when someone in the church comes to us and says, I'm really struggling to feed my family, and the first words out of many people in the church is, well, have you checked on food stamps? Well, how about, have you looked in your own back pocket at the extra $50 you got there that you don't know where you're going to spend it at, but maybe at Starbucks, or maybe at the local coffee place downtown where an Americano is $4, because I went and got one this morning. How about we help ourselves? How about we do the good thing? How about we use that wealth that God has given us to help other people? I think that's what Paul is telling Timothy about the rich. And it tells us one thing: there are rich people in the early church. And there are rich people in the church today. And it depends upon how they act. There were poor people in the early church, and there are poor people in the church today. We will always have the poor with us, and guess what? We will always have the rich with us. And we need both. But if we have the means, then we need to help other people if it is financially. But if we have the way to do it physically, then we do it physically. I mean, even I can push a broom. I don't want to get on my knees and pull nails, I'll be honest with you. I like those long-handled crowbars. But I can push a broom. I can carry plywood. I can do some of those things too. And we need to do that. So that's what Paul is trying to get forward to Timothy. But then he says, I want you to look at this next point. I think this is, we have people walking around but they're really dead. They just don't know it, but they really are dead because they haven't experienced true life yet. They just haven't experienced, because they haven't experienced that which Jesus gives to them. He says, I come to bring you life and bring it more what? Abundantly. And all of us probably have different ideas about that, what it might mean, huh, Charlie? The fish are biting. Every other cast, you get a bite. That life more abundantly. That big 6-point bull elk that you've been wanting to shoot, it's not at 350 or 600 yards, it's at 50 yards. Even Lloyd can hit one that close. My brother Lloyd, I don't know. Lloyd can even hit one that close. Do you see? Because Penny will tell him he can. But he says, thus storing up treasures for themselves is a good foundation for the future so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. It is why I have learned to say, because I haven't always done this, but I've learned to say that I'm not going to die. Because I'm going to go on and live eternally. I'm going to go to where the true life, and I'm going to enjoy that now. See, I think and I believe that I am enjoying eternity now. Now. I'm not going to wait until they stand over me in a grave and say, oh, wow, now I'm enjoying eternity. I'm not going to die. Just this body is, but me personally, the me of me, the important part of me, my soul and my spirit does not die. I get to go to heaven and I get to continue to live the true life. Jesus, I believe, on numerous occasions tried to get this point across and struggled to get it across to the people that he was talking to. I believe that we have tried in the church through the decades to get the point across. I feel like sometimes that we struggle to do it and we don't accomplish our goal. If you are a believer and a follower of Jesus Christ, if you have accepted him for who he is, if you have put him on in Christian baptism, you are a new creation and you are enjoying true life now. How many of you enjoy watching the little Karen clips that you get on Facebook once in a while? Huh? Deborah, you with me? Yeah. Karens sometimes are males, though, too. I guess they would call Kens. I don't know. But people who do not have a relationship with God and the way they act about the most petty of little things is just blows my mind away. It just I don't understand it. How can you get so upset about somebody in a boat fishing close to your dock? And they do. They call the police on them because somebody is fishing. They're by my dock. My dock. My goodness, and they're on your lake in their boat using their fishing pole with their bait, fishing for fish that do not belong to you. But I'm going to throw rocks and I'm going to cuss at you and I'm going to yell at you and I'm going to call the police on you because I'm not in your boat. And I'm not fishing. And I'm not enjoying what you're enjoying. So I'm going to make you miserable too. There are people who are so unhappy in life that their great goal in life is to make everybody else unhappy. And that is because they do not know Jesus. They don't know the joy that comes from knowing him, the benefits that come. And then Paul finishes up this chapter with a theme for him. He says, I want you to stay faithful. I want you to stay faithful. I graduated Boise Bible College in the spring of 1990. I was actually done in the fall, but graduation was, I was fall in 89, I was done. Graduation was in May of 90, and that's when I walked across the stage. They handed me a diploma and shook my hand and said, your bills are paid, we'll give you this. More than half the people I graduated with don't go to church. Hello? What part of 1 Timothy 6, 20 and 21 did they miss? And why is it that they are not faithful? For many, it's different reasons, but he says, "Oh, Timothy, guard the deposit entrusted you. Avoid the irreverent babble and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge, for by professing it, some have swerved from the faith." I do not like seminaries. I didn't say cemeteries. I said I do not like seminaries. I do not like Christian seminaries. I'll tell you why. I'm going to be very blunt. They get too smart. They get too smart for their own good. And they begin to think that they can interpret the Bible in their own special way, and then that they've got the knowledge about it, many of them. I have a nephew that is in that group of people that I just talked about. He says, I want you to stay away from those types of things. Don't get involved in all this unnecessary stuff that people think is real knowledge, and that people think, some of the smartest men in the world were before our time. When we go back to Newton and Locke, and we go back to some of the wise people in the Word, and by the way, I know Caleb's got 1 year of school left, but Caleb, your college education would maybe get you through the 10th grade in Thomas Jefferson's life. Maybe. We don't teach our young people like they used to be taught. And they don't learn some of the things that they need to learn. And then they go on to seminary, and then they unlearn all the basics. And so I do call them cemeteries. Christian cemeteries is what I call them. That's where people go to die. It's where they go to die in their faith far too often. That's just Ray. Okay, that's my opinion. It has nothing to do with salvation or any of that. But I say watch people who say, well, I've got a master's degree. So what? I've got a doctorate. Okay, good for you. I've got a Jesus degree. Stay faithful. You see, the hardest thing for a parent is to see their children not stay faithful. The hardest thing then for the church and the leadership in the church is to see people fall away and to not remain faithful. That's hurtful. And so what Paul is telling Timothy he says, hey, look, I want you to set this example. I want you to be like me, where he says, I have fought the good fight. I'm being poured out as a drink offering. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to stay faithful to that which you know and you've been entrusted with. You see, each one of you have been entrusted with the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's been given to you. It's been shared with you. You have taken it in. Stay faithful to it. Don't get sidetracked by everybody else and everything else. Don't chase the newest idea or the prettiest shiny little object. And I don't say this to besmirch anybody, because I've got some Pentecostal friends that are really, I'm pretty sure I'm going to see them in heaven. They are dedicated people to Jesus Christ. And I have seen them themselves go, no, Ray, that Toronto movement, no, we aren't having anything to do with that here. Well, why not? You watch. In 6 months, it'll be gone. I said, what'll take its place? Oh, some new thing will take its place. There'll be some new thing, They'll be fainting in the spirit here next week, They'll be doing this. They'll be doing that. They'll be chasing the next pretty little object. We don't need to chase pretty objects. We're chasing the King of Kings. We're following after the one who died for us, the one who saved us. We don't need those other things. And so I encourage you this morning, I encourage you to stay faithful to that which you know is true. Stay faithful to what the Bible says. Stay faithful to that which you have learned and that which you have been taught that matches up with what the Scripture says. And it will serve you well for eternity. And yes, I meant to say that. It will serve you well for eternity. You will get to continue to enjoy life for eternity. And here's the cool part about it. Lloyd, you will never have to crawl under somebody's house to enjoy life. You'll never have to run through the attic and chase wires through the attic to enjoy life. Charlie, the fish will be biting. The fish will be biting. Barbara, the piano will always be there for you. It'll always be there for you to play. And Deborah, they might even have bingo in heaven. They may have, I don't know, but they may have bingo. But I can tell you what the prize will be. The prize will be one more day with Jesus. And the next day on the bingo, you know what the prize is going to be? One more day with Jesus. Guess what the next day's prize is going to be? One more day with Jesus. You see, we don't have to worry about what life is going to bring because we know what life brings us. It brings us to Jesus Christ in eternity. That's where we're headed. Rhonda and I in a couple weeks are going to get on a plane and we're going to fly from Portland to San Francisco, San Francisco to Frankfurt, Frankfurt to Oslo. That's 4 times up and 4 times down. You know when I worry on a plane? Going up and going down. The rest of the time, nothing to worry about. You're just sitting there, right? But that going up and that going down. And somebody has said to me, because I have people who don't want to fly at all, and they said, well, Ray, what happens if you crash? And I said, well, I beat you. I beat you. When you get there, guess who's going to be there in front of you? Me. I beat you. You see, I'm not worried about death. Now there was a time when I was your age, Zoe, I worried about death a lot. I worried about death because I didn't know what all that meant. I had not lost a loved one in my family. And then death started to come, and I realized that my fuel tank is 3/4 empty. And I know women never worry about it because they never look at the fuel gauge. At least my wife never does. But let me just tell you, when I get to 1/4 of a tank, I start to worry about where the next gas station's at. In life, I don't worry about where the next gas station's at. I want to stay faithful. I want you to stay faithful because I want us to one day all be together in heaven. That's the end of 1 Timothy. That's it. 1 Timothy's done, gone. And hopefully you will continue to read it. No, we're not going to get into 2 Timothy. We're going to spend some time in parables. I want you to read the parable of the prodigal son. That's where we're going to start next week. I want you to read the parable of the prodigal son. And then I want you to be able to answer this question next week. What character am I? What character am I in the story of the prodigal son? Because we're all in it. Okay, we're all in it. Just like we're all here today. We're all here, and we're all in this story that's being written this morning. We're all in the story of the prodigal son, one place or another. And we may have at one time been all but one of the roles in the prodigal son.
In the